I do want to thank Dr. Elaine Bonner-Tompkins, the OLO staff, everybody who is involved in this very important initiative. Here we have also Ms. Ward, who has been coordinating a lot of this work on the executive side. I think this particular initiative is really a model for how the legislative branch has worked very closely with the executive branch, because obviously it's super important initiative for all of us. Let me also remind my colleagues that, as everybody knows, we have made the decision to engage this particular year in a very deliberative process that will then end in the adoption of legislation that will then institute a racial equity and social justice law in Montgomery County government. And I know that we are all tracking a lot of news, and as you can see, for example, in Washington, D.C., they're engaged in that same process. They do it a little bit differently, with an introduction of the legislation first, and then the input. Here, as I mentioned, we have decided to first engage in a lot of conversation, a lot of discussions out there in the community, as well as taking our time to go through these types of reports that will inform us and set us up to the work leading up to this drafting of legislation. Once we finish that legislation and it goes through its usual process, we will have additional input through our public hearing process. And then we will hopefully be able to adopt this legislation by the end of the year, making it effective January 2020, at which time the executive then will begin the implementation. That will mean that most likely the legislation may speak to the structure that should be set up on the executive side, as well as what we need to do here on the county council to be able to do this work. And so today we're going to hear about two reports, basically. One is pretty much, looking at what best practices of other jurisdictions have done. And the other one was this baseline, which I felt it was so important for us to have some kind of a profile or baseline so that as we begin to implement this legislation, et cetera, and this is, patient work that we will all engage in, we would have something to measure ourselves against. And I will have to say that as I was reading the report, it is pretty obvious to me that a lot of this data is not new. A lot of this data doesn't surprise me at all, but it is always so important to have things, written and things documented and data for us to be able to point to as we deliberatively go through our work. I will also say that this is a very auspicious time. We know that there have been pervasive and persistent issues in our community. And just recently, there's been a lot of energy and conversation regarding the selection of the new police chief in light of some issues that have occurred, some incidents that have occurred in our communities. That we've also seen a rise in hate speech in our schools and incidents in our schools as well. And even though Montgomery County has encountered those types of incidents in the past, it is really, in my opinion, unfortunate that we have seen a real frequency of these types of incidents in our community. So I believe it is a very auspicious time for us to be having these conversations, engaging in these conversations, because at the end of the day, it is about how do we utilize our resources. As we talk about budgets being a moral document, it is how we strategically utilize our resources to ensure that everybody in Montgomery County has access to opportunities, that everybody is treated with respect, that everybody is included. And so that is really the I think the framework of why this is important. I will also want to clarify, because I do read social media here and there sometimes. I think a lot of people some people are confused and think that we have already adopted some kind of policy or legislation, and are critical of what it is that we're supposedly doing, how woke we are. We have not adopted legislation yet. We're in that process. And this is not a competition about, who's woke and who's not. This is really about the hard work. This is serious business. This affects a vast majority of our residents. It affects many of us personally. And so that's why I am so happy to be serving with a group of council members and with an executive who understand that this is not a joke, this is not a game, this is serious business, and this is groundbreaking work. So I appreciate so much everybody coming to this from that perspective. So with that, Dr. Bonner-Tompkins, I'm going to turn it over to you. And again, thank you so much, as well as thanking the Jupiter Independent Research Group for this very, I think, important report. And turn it over, and you'll walk us through the presentation. Wow, you know, I mean, they say some people run for public office because, you know, their egos are so extraordinary. And they say some people run for public office because there is a very strong spiritual component to many, a lot of this work. At the end of the day, a lot of the people that we seek to help are not those who are so connected to the political process. They're the individuals who are invisible. And I truly believe, at least for me, that that is what should guide our work. That should be our legacy. And what you just described is, it is so real. And for me personally, the piece that breaks my heart mostly is to think that our young people have to walk out of their homes on a daily basis having to confront this, and the trauma that conveys, the pressures that conveys to our young people of color is very real. And I think it's evident in how moved you are and in your own experience. And so those of us also that have children that have to navigate this on a daily basis, it's absolutely necessary. It speaks to who we are as a county. We cannot pretend to tout ourselves as being so advanced and so cutting edge if we don't address these issues head on. And so I will just confess that, that's what motivated me to run in 2004 for the Board of Education. And I have tried my hardest to to chip away at this. At the same time, I would be criticized and, that I was only here to advocate on behalf of kids of color, or only for Latinos, or only for blacks, or whatever, which I really could care less about. But at the end of the day, here we are, and you're right. We're still dealing and looking at the same data points. So I'm just thrilled that we're here, and we're here for a reason. I do believe that. You're here for a reason. I think we're all here for a reason. This is a pivotal moment in Montgomery County, and I'm so excited that so many jurisdictions are feeling the same way.